Last week I managed to live stream most of CoolUmbrella's Friday night tournament, but unfortunately before the finals between John FB and Saber's Regnum, my internet gave out. So instead of casting their battle live, we'll be dedicating a whole separate tournament spotlight video just for the best of 3 between the two players. For the army build here, as the green side, John FB is bringing the High Elves here with a front line of White Lions of Strays flanked by a bunch of Rangers. At the back, more White Lions and some mobility here, Illyrian Reavers, some Archers, one of them the Talons of Torgaleda to provide that flaming weakness, and a couple Shadow Warriors on the flank. The High Elf spellcasting department consists of only healing, with the Life Mage bringing Regrowth and Earth Blood. Basically trying to top up the health of all these high elf units, especially the very expensive Imric on his dragon. Bring in his full kit, the Star Lance, the Dragon Horn, as well as Lord of Dragons. All 3 of the items and abilities are great in buffing up melee stats. Now for the Dawi frontline of Saber's Regnum, definitely a more well-known Dawi main in the current tournament scene. A frontline of miners with blasting charges, and then immediately behind them Rangers, sitting at the back ready to shower any incoming foes with their crossbow bolts. And at the further back here, Slayers and also a single Longbeard guarding the flame cannons with their great weapons. The Dawi Hero Core is very standard for Saber's Regnum, with Gotcha and Phoenix accompanying Floric, providing him with some reliable healing and excellent bodyguard. And that's it for the army builds. Now let's get the battle into normal speed, as the White Lions getting blasted away by a combination of Rangers and Flame Cannons being very effective against any infantry really. Densely packed or not, armored or not, the Flame Cannons will destroy them in combat, especially the Burnt debuff, providing an additional -8 leadership effect onto the White Lions, and you can see how quick these White Lions get destroyed and their leadership approaching routing territory. However, on the other side, the High Elf infantry is having a little bit more success, especially with Imric diving down to disrupt the blasting charges of the miners here, and then the White Lions buffed up by Dragonhorn are just slaughtering all these miners who doesn't have the greatest melee stats at only 18 defense. Of course, Floric will be responding with his own map-wide melee attack buff as well, the Rune of Doom. However, even with all that stat buffs, the dwarves are still not able to match the White Lions, with the martial prowess still buffing up the defenses on these high elf infantry. The Rangers are still firing, but they have limited damage against the White Lions, who not only have great armor at 90, but also have their additional 30% missile resistance, basically thinning out most of their incoming damage from all these crossbow bolts. On the far side, the Talons of Torquelada and the Archers who have been hiding away from the Flame Cannons are pushing in, while the Illyrian Reavers are charging into the Rangers, trying to disrupt the Dawi missiles here, and the Dawi doesn't have the greatest armor-piercing missiles right now, and even if they try to shoot at Imric, they won't be doing that much damage against his heavy armor and the scaly skin of 25% missile resistance. Slayers trying to chase down the Shadow Warriors, but they will be taking some overwatching fire from the Shadow Warriors. Thanks to the Flame Cannons though, the Shadow Warriors, one of them has suffered maximum damage from the explosives. But now it is time for the High Elves to showcase their own fire damage. Talons of Torquelada and the Archers here showering the artillery crew with their arrow fire. And the artillery crew doesn't have the greatest armor at only 40 and will be quickly destroyed. This is actually a great way to shut down artillery, as the artillery crews are usually quite fragile and will be routing at the very first sight of getting blasted by missile fire. Now on the side here, the miners are being broken by the Rangers and the White Lions combined. Illyrian Reavers charge in and once again to run down the routed Rangers, and Imric here trying to pin down the Slayers as the White Lions are quickly running in to support so that the Shadow Warriors can bail out of the situation and start firing onto the Slayers who have their backs turned, and their missile block chance will not be effective against the Shadow Warriors who are shooting at their flanks and their rear. Now back to the middle, Saber's favorite character trio is still going strong. All of them almost full health, all thanks to Felix's healing, and of course Floric's ability keeping all the units surrounding him with full vigor, forming a heavy metal fist to beat back all the high elf infantry. On the far side, some Slayers are pressuring the high elf archers, but the archers are just a bit too fast for them to catch up. The archers will be showering the slayers with their arrow fire, and the rangers are running behind them, trying to catch up and drag them into melee combat, which is very cost effective for these anti-infantry rangers with physical resistance that can help them mitigate incoming damage from the slayers. Wildlands are also coming in as well, but I assume the attack order got missed and they are not exactly chasing after the slayers. Now back to the dwarf blob. The characters took almost no damage, but the longbeards have taken some battle attrition. The white lions might be routing, but they are surely not going down without a fight. But still, if any high elf units short of Imrik himself tries to engage these Dawi units, they will surely get obliterated, so the high elves are trying to pick a more favorable engagement. The Dawi's lone slayer cannot control the map. They managed to catch some archers in the forest, but then the rangers are here to intercept and they will be taking massive damage in this engagement due to their lack of armor. On the far side here, some miners came back, but they will not be holding for long as they are extremely tattered in battle. A single volley from the Shadow Warriors is more than enough to rout them off, while the Longbeards are slowly taking attrition damage despite being supported by all these Dawi heroes and a single human hero actually. The archers are also firing into the fray. Not exactly the best target here against Thoric Ironbrow. He does have 40% of resistance against physical missiles, but the fire weakness applied by the talents of Torquelada does boost their damage output for a tiny bit. It will synergize greatly with Imrik's armor-piercing fire damage, especially with Imrik having enough melee attack to consistently make contact with everything on the Dawi army right now, though Imrik was too busy fighting some scattered Dawi units until now. At the same time, the Shadow Warriors are also coming in, aiming their arrows at Thoric and his toilet seat. Imrik charging in, the Rune of Doom is activated on the Longbeards, but as they turn their backs on the White Lions and try to chase after Imrik, the White Lions will be instead hacking them down from behind. Now Imrik has pulled out of the engagement for some healing, while on the far side, the Shadow Warriors as well as the archers are just pouring their arrow fire into the fray, steadily working down the Longbeards, and with Imrik jumping into the blob. The Talon's flammable effect will come in really handy as Imrik starts attacking Thoric. With the 25% fire weakness and the Starlands activated on Imrik, Thoric is taking massive damage from the melee engagement. On top of that, John FB has been psycho-charging Imrik's Star Dragon, as the archers have been fulfilling the attacking role by shooting at all the Dawi units. As a result, Thoric will be executed by concentrated volley fire from the High Elves, and with that, army losses is hit, Felix is routed, and Gottrik's death is only a matter of time. He might be unbreakable, but there is no need to delay the inevitable, so Saber's Regnum will be admitting defeat. A great first game from both John FB and Saber's Regnum. For a quick army rundown, the White Lions of Thrace being buffed up by Dragonhorn basically crumped the front line of the miners and threatened the rangers immediately, and as a result, the Dawi infantry were not able to do too much damage in melee combat or in ranged combat. The High Elf missiles are also great at doing damage this time. The Shadow Warriors not quite so, but the regular archers and the Talons definitely earning back their own value, concentrating their fire on the Flame Cannon crew, Slayers, and also Thoric Ironbrow in the late game. While the Rangers were there to cut down the Slayers with their anti-infantry bonus, the Slayers who doesn't have much armor will take full damage from their melee attacks. While the hero core here, the Mage of Life mostly there to top up the health of Imrik, and Imrik doing some pretty solid damage overall, while the Dawi, the infantry didn't do much here, especially the Slayers being forced into engagement by the Rangers. This one earned back their value, probably managed to get their hands on Imrik, but that's about it. The Flame Cannons got burned by the Talons, which is quite ironic, while Saber's favorite hero core, Felix, Gotrek, and Thoric Ironbrow, they did some pretty solid damage overall, but just not enough to earn back their own cost as they were busy fighting a whole bunch of White Lions and Rangers, which are not exactly units they want to fight. Felix didn't do much damage, but he's mostly there for healing anyways. And that is the end of the first battle, and we'll be moving on to the second one. In the second game, both armies are going for a super wide formation here, with John FB going for a Vampire Coast, with the Sirens flanking his main army of a line of zombie pirate gunnery mobs and a whole bunch of animated hulks mixed in with some regular Death Guard with their dual axes. On the left flank, there are some Mongols going after the Illyrian Reavers, who will be quickly retreating as they don't want to get tied down by the Mongols and cut down by the Sirens. And as for the leadership, we have Count Noctilus here bringing in a bunch of spells, abilities, Pit of Shades, Invocation of Nahak, and his whole bunch of Rave Storm, zombie summons, and whatnot. Now for the High Elves, a very wide army as well. A whole bunch of archers, Loven Sea God with shields, White Lions of Shrey's, and a Tactless without any abilities other than that of Amantok. At the back, a bunch of archers mixed in with Sisters of Avalon going for full missile spams, opening fire at any kind of Vampire Coast army they can see. John FB using his micro to sneak those animated hulks past the rather dispersed front line of the High Elves. There's no High Elf mobility to stop them, and they can freely charge the archers at the backline. Sisters of Avalon and archers all silenced by Vampire Coast monsters. Count Noctilus also dropped a zombie summon, going after the Sisters of Avalon, while over here there's a whole bunch of Morngulls and the animated hulks trying to catch up with the Sisters of Avalon. They're being charmed by the Sirens and also slowly cut down, but a nice net of Amantok locking down the entire area and preventing all the Vampire Coast units from pursuing the High Elf archers, allowing all these Loven Sea God and Sisters to start focusing down all these Vampire Coast units. The Sisters even having a few models disrupted by melee attacks, they should still be able to fire in guard mode, and their magic missiles will be very effective against the Sirens. On the far side, Death Guards have worked their way through all those White Lions. Unfortunately, White Lions do not have a great engagement against the Death Guards simply because these guys heal in melee combat, have great melee stats, and also 71 weapon strength plus bonus versus infantry. The White Lions' heavy armor and melee defense simply is just not enough in front of the high weapon strength and high melee attack of the Death Guards. A Pit of Shades destroying a bunch of Loven Sea God, and they will be worked down, while the spears are trying desperately to tie down Count Noctilus so that Tactless, who does not have a mount, can try to get away. Also, Morngulls are trying to push for the backline, but there's an undisturbed unit of Sisters of Avalon who are able to provide overwatching fire, shooting up the Morngulls. Another net of Amantok controlling their movement, and they will be sitting ducks against the powerful missiles of the Sisters. On the left flank of the High Elves, a whole bunch of animated hulks and the Sirens have taken massive damage throughout the combat as the Loven Sea Gods have been cross-firing in. Death Guards getting onto some Loven Sea God and slowly cutting them down, but the missile pressure will continue to stay on. The archers will be peeling off while the White Lions and Loven Sea God will try to hold back the adversaries. Of course, the High Elf infantry will not be holding for long against the self-healing and unroutable Death Guards, but still they are distracting the Vampire elites, allowing the missile pressure from other sources to dish out the pain. Now back to the middle, some Death Guards are combining with the animated hulks, sandwiching the Sisters of Avalon. This also buys time for the other Sisters to crossfire into the fray, allowing them to work down the animated hulks. Without any protection against enemy missiles, these undead monsters are not long for this world. On the side, Tactless' health is running low after the Rave Storm ability bombarding him, and he doesn't have the speed to get away from melee engagements. Count Noctilus will be pushing for the Sisters of Avalon, trying to silence them so that the Death Guards can continue to fight on. At the back, a Loven Sea God is tied down by a summoned deckhand mob, unable to provide fire support, and the Illyrian Reavers trying to run down the zombie pirate gunnery mobs. Basically a very scattered battlefield right now with engagements happening left, right, and center. There's still some animated hulks using their mobility advantage, trying to chase down the Sisters of Avalon, Sirens as well, cutting down some Loven Sea God. But the problem is that Count Noctilus is still very much healthy here, and propping up that balance of power for the Vampire Coast, especially considering he can drop his summons all over the place to further inflate it. Now, with the help of a rear charge from the Illyrian Reavers, perhaps the Loven Sea God can survive as long as the zombie pirate deckhand mobs doesn't stay on for too long. Good news for the Loven Sea God, the zombies only have less than 20 seconds of life left. Now let us fast forward here as the battle drags on for quite a bit. Sisters of Avalon being worked down by Sirens and animated hulks, they will be routed, terror routed indeed, by the Sirens. A Sisters of Avalon is still quite healthy in the middle, trying to dish out the damage. And now the Sirens will be compromising them with a help from a sandwiching animated hulks. Thankfully, there's still a regrouped Sisters of Avalon cross-firing with their magic missiles, bypassing the physical resistance and doing damage directly to the Sirens. And on the far side, there are some High Elf regrouping due to their ridiculously high leadership. Their missiles might not be magical, but with how battered these Sirens are, the damage should still be enough to put them into disintegration. Now the problem for the High Elves is that the one healthy unit of Sisters of Avalon has taken significant losses after being surrounded. They are trying to retreat and wait for the zombie summons to disappear, and the regrouped missile infantry will continue to chip away the health of the vampire units. At least as the living, they should have enough speed to stay ahead of the undead. But there's an even bigger issue right now on the battlefield for the High Elves, and that is Tactless himself. He's on foot right now, and without the mass of a mount, he can easily get knocked around, being pummeled all the way across the map. And by the time he gets back onto his feet, he is already surrounded by a bunch of monsters. Which is a massive problem for Tactless, who doesn't have enough mass or speed to get away from this engagement. Elarian Reavers trying to save their Liege Lord, but Tactless will be routed away due to extremely low HP down to minus 26 leadership. If we have an overview of the battlefield, we can see that High Elves might have a bit more of a board presence with all their units available on the field, while the Vampire Coast only have Count Noctilus. The balance of power is heavily in favor of the Vampire Coast simply because Tactless is still very much healthy, and he is also a caster lord, which weighs heavier on the balance of power. At the same time, more bad news is coming as Count Noctilus is giving chase to a routed Tactless. With all the infantry so far away and the Reavers routing, there's nothing to stop Noctilus from chasing Tactless down. Safe to say, the High Elves will be losing their leader. All these Loven Sea God as well as the Sisters are trying their best to chip away the health of Count Noctilus and also just stopping him from chasing after Tactless, but unfortunately there's just not a lot of options here, especially when there's those zombie pirate deckhand mobs roaming on the battlefield, trying to zone away the Sisters and the Loven Sea Guard. And with the white line so close, unfortunately Tactless will not be coming back as there is a lack of mobility units to pin down Count Noctilus. This dealt a huge blow to the morale of the already tattered High Elf army. Still, Count Noctilus is taking a lot of crossfire damage, especially from the armor-piercing missiles from the Sisters of Avalon. The balance of power actually stabilized a bit, but a healing from Count Noctilus' Invocation of Nahak pushes the balance of power all the way. Some of the Sisters routed and then the others follow suit, giving John FB the victory of the second game of the best of 3 as well as the victory to the entire Friday tournament. GG to both John FB and Saber's Regnum for this amazing tournament match, and of course big thanks to CoolUmbrella for letting me cast this tournament live. Unfortunately, due to networking issues, I wasn't able to cast everything on the live stream, but with my internet being fixed soon, I should be able to start streaming normally again. Now for the army performances rundown, the High Elves actually could have won this game as they were quite ahead in terms of damage value. A lot of their missile units performed spectacularly in this combat, and even the Elarian Reavers did some pretty nasty damage to the vampire units. But the problem is that Tactless was routed and broken off the battlefield by Count Noctilus himself, and that dealt a huge blow to the leadership of all these battered High Elf units, and in the end, with Count Noctilus forcing that balance of power in their favor with the sheer amount of healing he gets, the High Elves were defeated despite they still have the tools to shoot down Count Noctilus, with some of the Sisters of Avalon still on the field. Now for the Vampire Coast army performances, the Death Guards did amazing as they basically wrecked everything on the field with their anti-infantry high weapon strength. Also their armor and their healing helps a lot as well, while the zombie pirate gunnery mob, they're just dirt cheap, so even if they get shot up, it's not a huge loss. The Sirens though are very vulnerable to the magic missiles of the Sisters of Avalon, so not a lot of damage was dealt by them. While over here, Animated Hulks, they actually took a lot of damage from all the crossfire from the Loven Sea God, from the Sisters as well, since they do not have the greatest armor. The Morngulls is also suffering from the same issue. And that's basically it for the tournament spotlight. I hope viewers you enjoy it, and if you want to see more multiplayer battles, be sure to subscribe to the channel and keep an eye out for new video uploads. Anyways, that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.